Hello and welcome to this episode of Have You Heard, where we explore the science in the news and reveal the real story behind the dramatic headlines. For example,
have you heard eating chocolate with zinc could help you live longer?
Have you heard drinking 6 cups of coffee a day helps you live longer, even though that's twice the recommended daily dose?
And have you heard red wine can both kill you and make you live longer?
This episode, a group of us will be discussing news stories that relate to food, drink, and nutrition. Today we have...
I'm Katie, I'm a first year PhD student at the University of Manchester, and my research is looking at how things move around in the cell, but what I like to say is it's glowy protein science. And when I drink too much wine, I get what I call wine knees.
My name's Jason Chu, I'm a second year PhD student and I'm doing a PhD project on biomedical imaging, so I'm taking pictures of immune cells in the wound. And the worst thing I've ever eaten was when I was in Thailand and I had essentially a bowl of soup which was made of bird saliva.
And I'm Luke. I'm a PhD student as well here at the University of Manchester. My work is trying to teach computers to predict heart attacks. And I have never successfully eaten a Nutri-Grain bar without throwing up.
What?
I struggle to come to the conclusion that I'm allergic or anything to something in it, but I've had a Nutri-Grain bar twice, and on both occasions I've thrown up within half an hour.
Oh, damn.
I missed out on a school trip to a farm.
Oh no!
Because for breakfast I was in a hurry and had a Nutri-Grain bar.
Was that the first time?
Yeah, that was the
okay,
first
so
time.
you didn't know the situation. Yeah.
It
You
could have
didn't
been
know that-
anything.
Yeah.
Second time, it seems suspicious, but I wouldn't come to the conclusion that it's something wrong with the Nutri-Grain bar or me. But I'm hesitant to try a Nutri-Grain bar again.
But then you've got to do everything in triplicate for it to be a little bit significant.
There we go. Science.
I feel like we've already designed a study. But also, bird saliva soup?
Yeah. So I'm quite easygoing when it comes to most foods, but I think this was the point where I realised that something's not quite right here. The consistency of the soup was very viscous.
Don't wanna know.
Well, my main question is, did someone tell you it was bird saliva, or did you taste it and you were like, yeah, that's definitely bird saliva?
So I went in not knowing what it is, because I'm always keen to try things before realising what they are, just to get an idea, because I don't want to be biased and thinking, oh, it's this nasty thing, I'm not going to have it.
It's an admirable approach, but also dangerous?
Very dangerous. The consistency of it, that didn't sit well with me, and then I asked, what was it? And then he said it's this nice soup that it's very difficult to come by, but essentially it's they take the fluids from the salivary gland of this bird that they find in the cave and get it into a soup. So I don't know how many birds had to spit into this bowl before I had this.
I'm not imagining they generate a lot of saliva.
No. This is the soup that I had, and it was one of the worst foods I've ever eaten. So,
Oh god.
and what are wine knees?
wine knees.
I have claimed about wine knees for quite a while. Just think about it. Whenever you're having about 3 glasses of wine, you're probably sat down. So you're not feeling your knees in any way. If you stand up after exactly 3 glasses of wine, you'll become aware of like a fuzzy feeling in your kneecaps.
Oh. Okay. I think I might, yeah.
Yeah, it's a thing. I've
never
sure.
noticed it before, but it's definitely a case that when you're drinking and you stand up for the first time after...
There's a distinct
tingly...
sort of buzz, specifically in your wine caps.
That is exclusively how I will be referring to my knees from now on.
Under personal experiments, I don't think it happens for any other alcohol. For me, it is just wine, and it is especially worse for red wine.
Interesting.
So I would love some research into that.
Again, another study. I feel like we could do this. We could publish some papers.
There are some serious studies into red wine, as you guys are about to find out.
Shall we start with some of the articles that we've been looking at?
Yeah, let's go for it. So this week I have been looking at all of the controversy that surrounds red wine. So I'm sure you guys have heard, at least at some point in your life, that drinking red wine in moderation, maybe a glass a night for a week, or drinking red wine on a weekday, is actually good for your health in various numbers of ways.
Yeah, it's something that crops up often. And I'm the kind of person that really wants to hear positive things about drinking.
Yes, it's exactly the kind of science that I want to hear more about. Yeah. But also at the same time, you'll be seeing headlines that debunk this kind of stuff, showing research that says, no, actually, it doesn't do any of this stuff. In fact, it decreases your life expectancy. So what is actually going on here, and what's the research behind this?
Yeah, it certainly seems you could easily think that it's all contradictory, that science doesn't know what it's talking about, because you see an article every other week that contradicts how much wine I should be drinking.
Yes, exactly. And we all want to know that actually it's perfectly fine.
As the two
and
people
absolute cheers to that. Wine has been long associated with the everything in moderation mindset, and red wine is absolutely swimming in healthcare claims. So even if you go back 100 years, wine was actually sort of prescribed as treatments to a number of diseases, and it was said to be the secret to monks' long life was that they were just basically raging winos.
Nice. It's looking good for Luke so
I know,
far.
yeah, this is good. This is good news so far.
It's going well. So the main health benefit that's associated with red wine and all of these red wine health claims is that it's high in antioxidants, and particularly a chemical called resveratrol. Let's just break this down for a second. So what is a antioxidant? I'm sure you've heard about it. It's here, there, and everywhere in the media.
It's something that's mentioned a lot, and I keep meaning to look at, but you just go for like a brief explanation, and then you're like, oh, okay, I get it.
Yeah,
Right.
makes sense.
But yeah, I've never looked into it in detail.
Okay, so let's go back to the basics. So a substance that inhibits oxidation. Oxidation is something that's happening all around you all the time because we live in an environment that, luckily for us, is full of oxygen. So if you ever cut up a piece of apple, you'll come back to that and it will be brown. And you're like, oh, gross, like it's gone off. But no, it's not gone off. That's the process that's caused it to go brown is called oxidation. And that
so is that Oh, that's cool.
So it's the same with bananas as well, just as an example of another fruit. So when you peel open the bananas and then it starts to go brown.
Yeah.
Yep.
Most fruits going brown is an oxidization thing, and that's why fruits tend to have skins.
To protect against that.
And that is one of the sources of antioxidants in red wine is the grape skins.
Oh, that makes complete sense.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, I like it.
Antioxidants, which we'll come to, are nature's sun cream for fruits and veg. So,
Oh my God,
So oxidation is the chemical process that would happen if you just left something exposed to the oxygen that's all around.
Yes,
and so plants have developed a way of protecting themselves from that, so they have this skin which contains these chemicals to try and stop the oxidation.
Exactly.
I love it.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Nice. I've learned something already. This is wonderful.
How clever. So just going back to a bit of the chemistry of it, oxygen nicks electrons off things. It's an oxidizing agent, which is quite nice because it sounds like it. So if you expose oxygen to an environment, it'll start nicking electrons off things, and that'll leave the things that it took an electron off with an unpaired electron. In all chemistry, electrons want to be paired up because unpaired electrons are super reactive and super unstable, and they will desperately be trying to pair up because they're super romantic and want to mate for life. So this is happening all around, and when it happens in your cells, this can cause some serious problems.
So it changes the chemicals in your cells, which stops them doing their jobs, and start to break down.
And it really quickly spreads. So it's quite dangerous. And these substances which have got an unpaired electron are also known as free radicals, which you may have also seen thrown around in the media.
Heard of them, yeah.
They always pair up quite nicely, that kind of...
Yeah, the antioxidants and free radicals. And then also you may have seen that there's also these things called reactive oxygen species, and these are free radicals that are derived from oxygen being naughty and nicking things. Just to clear up that jargon, because a lot of journals and papers use those quite interchangeably and it can get quite confusing. So you get all of these free radicals in your body, and these are super reactive molecules which are basically just loose cannons reacting with loads of things, and it's almost always things that you don't necessarily want them to be reacted with. Free radicals are implicated in cancer, heart disease, decline in normal body functions, decline in brain function, and decline in immune system function. They are super dangerous, basically. And implicated in, I think, the latest total is at least 50 diseases. So that sort of shows you the importance of controlling free radicals in the cell. But also, nobody panic. Free radicals and oxidation and antioxidants, it's all happening in your body all the time. It's okay. Your body is an absolute machine.
Thank you, Katie.
Just a direct compliment to you there, Luke.
I've always been proud of it.
Basically, your body has pretty much the answer and solution to most things that it encounters in its kind of everyday body life. So your super clever cells can use all of these free radicals that you're producing all the time for a number of really good reasons. It'd be actually used in cell signaling, basically letting the cell know what's going on around it. So that's a really important thing. And it also does loads of other cool things, but we don't have time to get into that.
Oh, wow. So they're not just a byproduct. They're used to signal between cells. And okay.
It's really
so they're a necessary thing.
My body is clever.
It is clever, exactly. But because we're exposed to all of these, your cells in your body need to keep the free radical and reactive oxygen species concentration sort of stabilized in your cells. And this is achieved by a delicate balance between pro-oxidant mechanisms and anti-oxidant mechanisms. And when you get any imbalance in these, you get oxidative stress or antioxidant stress.
Okay.
And that's when things start to go really wrong because your free radicals either take over or you've not got enough free radicals to do sort of energy transfer and various things like that. So what's important to consider here is what affects that balance between pro and antioxidant mechanisms. There's lots of things that can do this, but as with most things, it starts from the outside and works its way in with those cheeky environmental factors. So things like pollutants, alcohol, various medications, infections, bad diet, UV radiation are all linked to an increase in oxidative stress. Mm-hmm. So basically all of the things that we are continually exposing ourselves to in modern life. So sunny cities basically, but it's okay because we live in Manchester.
There we go.
I don't even remember what the sun looks like. No. I don't think I've...
So this is where a lot of these modern headlines stem from because they're sort of incorporated into that sort of threat that we have that our modern life is dangerous. That is because our modern life has increased our risk and exposure to a bunch of these factors. More
so than we would have
done
naturally encountered as an animal. Yeah.
So what can we do to help maintain our bodies as healthy as they can be? So like I've already said, there's existing mechanisms going on in your body to combat this, and these are those antioxidant mechanisms. So your body produces antioxidants naturally.
Mm-hmm. In the same way that fruit does. Like the fruit has that natural coating, we have a system in place.
We have our own system, but it is done in entirely different ways. Mm-hmm. So there's two main ways that our antioxidant mechanisms work within humans, and that's ones that are inherent to us. So these are things that are encoded in our DNA. They produce antioxidant proteins and enzymes, which are expressed at different times in response to stress. So an example of this is an excellently named enzyme, in my opinion, and it's called SOD.
SOD, nice.
Excellent. It's superoxide dimutase, if anybody's interested, and it's the most populous enzyme in your body. The other more well-known way of getting antioxidants into your body and the way that humans get antioxidants is through our diet. And even when you think about it hard enough, the production of your natural antioxidants, going back to those proteins, that also comes from your diet, because all of the building blocks that make you and everything that needs to be produced comes from what you eat and what you put into your body. It all really comes down to your diet, and that can be just to get the pure antioxidants themselves from other branches of life. So you can get them from plants, you can get them from other animals, or you build them yourselves through digesting food and building it all back up again. For example, even that protein that I spoke to you guys about before, called SOD, that needs a specific micro cofactor to work properly. Mm-hmm. So
it needs a what now?
A what?
A what now?
A micro cofactor is something that's non-proteinous that binds to a protein and allows it to work. So these can be like zinc, iron, copper, magnesium, or whole vitamins. That is how you link a lot of those substances to antioxidant impacts in the cell.
So your body needs to combine different bits to put together the antioxidants that you use.
Yes, exactly. For the ones that we sort of build up ourselves. So that's really clever, and that works quite well. But also, like I say, you can get them directly from the diet. A lot of common antioxidants include vitamin C, vitamin E, beta-carotene, and phenolic compounds. And these can all be found in loads of foods, but mostly they're found in fruits, veggies, and nuts.
So if we eat more fruit, veg, and nuts, generally speaking, we have more building blocks for that antioxidant stuff that we need.
Yes, but it's not just the building blocks, it's the actual antioxidant compounds themselves, because, for example, vitamin C itself is an antioxidant. So it's a chemical structure that goes into your body and it can enter your cells and do all of the things that it needs to do. And ultimately, what antioxidants need to do is terminate those free radical chain reactions and stop it from going on too long.
Okay, so, because one of the main things that I've got the impression from reading articles about antioxidants and things, they're always framed in terms of the more antioxidants you have, the better, because free radicals are bad and they mop them up, which is the case. That's how they work, but it's important what you mentioned before, which is that you're looking for a balance between the free radicals produced and the antioxidants, because too many antioxidants is also bad. So it's not the case, because you're saying you can get them from the diet, it's not the case that you could be like, cool, well, I'll just eat loads of things with raspberries, antioxidants in, and that will be good.
Yeah. No, that's not necessarily the case. So just like anything, if you have too much of it, it can cause some issues. So, for example, vitamin C really aggressively binds to iron. So if you have too much vitamin C, you can end up with iron deficiency, even if you eat loads of iron.
Because it clears it away.
Oh, I've got a little fun fact about vitamin C while
Bring
we're
it on.
that topic. So I'm hoping I've remembered this correctly. Basically, vitamin C, so a vitamin is just something that your body can't produce that it needs to get from food. And it's actually really rare for vitamin C to be a thing for most animals. So most animals can produce vitamin C. I think it's primates, like our close relatives.
Yes,
fruit bats and guinea pigs, I think, are the only animals that can't make vitamin C on their own. So they need to eat it in their food. Whereas every other animal is just looking at us going, oh, why don't you just make it like we do?
And are all three of them are bats mammals? This might be a naive question. So I wonder what evolutionary advantage we had. Oh, wait. Katie's just jumping in excitement.
Fun fact on top of fun fact, Katie.
Fun fact on top of fun fact squared. So that is absolutely correct. There's only 3 sort of major species which lack the ability to make vitamin C. But we all have the gene and the protein that allows us to produce it, but there's been a mutation in it that makes it inactive. So there's 3 different mutations for the major species that haven't got the ability to make vitamin C. They're all slightly different. We have the gene. We can do it. It's just a little bit, it's gone a bit wrong.
That's even more annoying.
Yeah.
That's really going to upset some 14th century pirates. Yeah.
Yeah, scurvy dogs, exactly.
Yeah.
Just thinking along that line, imagine if we could, genetically modify us to have the ability to produce.
Just switch that on.
We
never need to eat another lemon again.
So, why are these headlines so contradictory that we see, like, geez, modern life is stressful and complicated enough. Please just tell me that drinking wine is going to be fine. Okay,
please,
you.
Katie, please tell me.
Says look and I as we go through half a bottle of wine during this.
So I did a very quick search looking at red wine in headlines. So let's see what the media is saying.
Let's hear these.
Healthy or harmful? How much wine should we really be drinking? Red wine, not good for you after all. Anti-inflammatory diet, including chocolate, red wine and beer, can help you live longer. Red wine increases cancer risk, but 9 out of 10 drinkers are unaware of the danger. Boosts your brain power. Red wine boosts fertility in women. A chemical found in red wine and dark chocolate rejuvenates your cells. And red wine should be drank for a better life, but not a longer life.
Yeah, I can see that one. That one definitely makes sense.
But there's a lots of ups and downs in terms of which direction it's going in some of these headlines. So what were we meant to believe in? What's right? What's wrong?
Help us, Katie.
What's going on? Okay, so as a self-confessed wine expert, I am here to help. Why are there so many conflicting studies? Surely it should just be a net benefit or a net negative.
Yeah.
So it's because you've got to consider all of the aspects of red wine in isolation and together. So the effects of the antioxidants that are in the wine, that's good. But then there's also the effect of the high calorie intake. There's the intoxication component. There's the fact that alcohol itself is a depressive drug. So there's lots of these chemicals together in wine, and depending on which one you focus on, you're going to get a different.
There we go. Because
health
wine's
benefit.
not just antioxidants. There's a lot else going on in there. But yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So, okay. So if I'm looking into, like you say, the depressive effects of alcohol, for example, if I'm doing a study that's looking at that, I can conclude that wine is bad because of that effect. But I'm not looking at wine as a whole.
Yes.
Whereas if I'm looking particularly at the benefits of antioxidants, I could say, oh, well, wine contains antioxidants, therefore
wine
there
is
is a
good.
positive effect.
Yes, exactly. It's literally breaking it down. There's also another aspect to consider here, and that's there's different ways of studying red wine that have been reported in the media. So there's the one that we just talked about where they've broken wine down into the chemicals that are of interest to a certain disease or positive effect or negative effect. So that's one, so breaking them down. There's also just having wine and not having wine as a human or in a population study. And then there is looking at various chemicals in animal studies or in cell studies. So depending on how it's been investigated really affects the output. Always really important to consider when you're reading these things. Is it done in humans? Is it done in cells? Is it done in animals? Or is it done based on a sort of population-wide study? Because these all really change how you consider and interpret the results.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the pro studies tend to be done on the components of red wine, where they purify an antioxidant. They get it pure in a little bottle and then either pour it on cells or give it to animals and then test how their physical responses are. But a little bit closer, and looking in here, looks a little bit less good for red wine. For these studies, it's not exactly the concentrations of antioxidants that you'd find in your average glass of Merlot. The exposure times were mostly of an excess of 47 hours. And I don't know about you, I don't think I could hold red wine in my mouth for that long. And oh my god, the staining.
Wait, what, like just continuous?
Just continuous.
So what were these studies on? Animals?
It's on animals, yeah. That's one thing to consider. And also the concentrations that were used in these studies that showed that it was beneficial to preventing neurodegenerative diseases such as dementia were concentrations that would equal about 1,000 bottles of Merlot a day.
Yeah, I think you'd probably die of something else before you saw the beneficial effects.
1,000 bottles of wine.
I think
I could do that on a Friday, but maybe not every day of the
Not
week.
every day. No, it's not quite sustainable. Definitely not on a PhD budget. It's a really big factor here that a lot of the health benefits that you'll see that are making these bold claims about red wine are actually a purified and concentration version of one of the antioxidants that is found in red wine. And that is very important to bear in mind. So I'm afraid I'm going to have to conclude that red wine is not quite the golden chalice that's made out to be. It does.
Damn it.
It does contain some good things. It has those good antioxidants. When you think about it, it's been shown that if you're going to choose an alcoholic beverage, the best one to choose is red wine. If you're going to drink, you may as well get some nice antioxidants.
Yes, so my headline was, eating chocolate with zinc could help you live longer.
Tell me more.
Yeah.
Wait. First up, do I need to eat my Dairy Milk bar with a block of zinc? Because first off, I'm thinking, where can I get my hands on some zinc and pair this bad boy up together?
Eat the chocolate and its wrapper.
Chocolate and wrapper can make you live longer. So I think we're supposed to break down the headlines and not scare you.
Coming up with some good advertising campaigns.
But yeah, zinc is in lots of food. This was an article I was looking at that I think it did its rounds on Facebook because, hearing that chocolate can make you live longer is exactly the kind of thing that gets spread around Facebook because we all want it to be true.
Yes.
That's how these headlines work. And so this was an article by The Independent looking at a new study that had come out. The basic premise is that there's a chemical that you find in chocolate, which are called phenols. And we did mention,
Katie mentioned that,
we're talking about antioxidants, phenolic compounds, so things that involve phenols. So these compounds are antioxidants, so they can protect against free radicals. and are found in things like chocolate, tea and coffee as well. So they're talking about the idea that in combination with zinc, these compounds become antioxidants and can protect against free radicals. And because free radicals are something that they, like we were mentioning, they do damage to the chemicals in your body. If you have more antioxidants, it'll protect against the free radicals. And the thing they're talking about, I think, is that it can damage your DNA,
Yep.
which is one of the sources of aging. So the idea is if you had more of these antioxidants, you'd age slower and would live longer.
So more chocolate means I'll live longer.
Yes,
so that's the logic behind it. Yeah,
exactly
there we go.
So they've taken quite a lot of steps there. So it was if you eat chocolate and zinc, it gets into your system, and this has been shown when they react together is a antioxidant compound, and this is something that can minimize free radicals. And if you don't minimize free radicals, you get aging, and therefore if you use this, you don't get aging.
Yes.
That is a lot
I think
of
I think that is the overall message of the article. But yes, I think they've made a few assumptions about what's going on with the science behind this headline. So they're basing it on a study, work by some researchers from the University of Erlangen in Nuremberg.
Nuremberg, there we go. Yeah.
And Auburn University in Alabama.
Yep.
So they are looking at these potential antioxidant compounds in the phenol group. The paper that this seems to be based on is from Nature, which is Nature.
Oh,
so,
nice.
so it's a pretty prestigious and pretty spot on
hard to
journal.
get into.
So for I guess for non-scientific listeners, Nature is like the equivalent of being at the Premier League compared to League Two.
Exactly.
As a sports analogy.
Really good example. And so Nature has, because it's a big publication, it's got loads of different bits, but this one is the chemistry wing of Nature, which is, I suppose, kind of the first suspicious thing.
Okay, yeah. How come?
It's published in Nature Chemistry,
And
whereas the headline seems to imply that we're talking about biology or medicine.
Okay. I see what you mean, yeah.
So I looked into the article. It's looking at how scientists in a lab, away from kind of an animal or a human body, they're talking about purely the chemistry behind how you would create this kind of chemical.
So like Katie was talking about earlier, looking at that isolated compound, that isolated individual element of, I guess, within chocolate.
Yes. It's these phenol compounds and the fact that you can do a bunch of chemical reactions to combine it with zinc, and it has these antioxidant properties, but they're not using chocolate or tea or coffee. It's just this pure substance that happens to be found in tea and coffee and chocolate. Mm-hmm. And they've found a way of combining it with zinc that produces an antioxidant, and they demonstrate that it's a really good antioxidant, that it can stop free radical reactions and things like that. But this is done all outside of the body.
Okay.
So they've demonstrated production and its efficacy outside of the human body.
Okay, so they've shown that this chocolate compound and zinc can interact under certain conditions in the lab. So we don't technically know that if you eat a bunch of chocolate and a bunch of zinc, whether they will react in the cell.
Exactly. So
but it's that first step behind finding that kind of information, but it's not, like you say, it's not been in the body. We don't know if it's biologically relevant. Yeah.
It's very early stages, and the reason that the article is important is that because zinc is something that your body naturally uses, the bits that we think the antioxidant would break down into aren't going to be toxic to the body, whereas experiments they've done before have used other metals instead of zinc, and they've shown that they're probably harmful. So this is a big step towards developing an antioxidant that might be useful, but the important thing is that currently we're making no claims that it will work or...
So the headline that we had from, who was it, the Independent, is a considerable stretch from what the actual research was based on.
Yeah, they're implying that one day it might be the case that if you eat a load of chocolate but you also take a zinc supplement, that will prolong your life.
Okay.
But that is, yes, misunderstanding the chemistry involved in producing these compounds. So that's unlikely to be true, and we don't currently have any evidence that that's the case. There's just a few assumptions have been made to get to this title of chocolate will prolong your life. It's difficult because, so for example, when you say, oh, these phenols, they're in chocolate,
yeah,
and they've come up with this chemical process to add zinc to it, and it works as an antioxidant. Oh, the reason it works is because it's very chemically similar to a sod, which we discussed before. So the idea is it would be chemically similar and would do the same job as a sod.
That's really cool.
But that's the thing. So a scientist will then say, oh yeah, we've done this in the lab, we've managed to make this chemical. We're hoping one day that maybe that will help us create a drug or something which isn't very exciting for most people. The fact that scientists is hoping to do more work that might lead to something important.
Maybe.
It's an important step, but if you're trying to report on this kind of thing, you want to say, oh, scientists are that step closer to making chocolate make us live longer. And that's so you can get very excited about the idea, but it always takes more steps and more research. In terms of making people live longer, I believe, Jason, you've brought a treat for us.
Yes. So I saw a headline the other day, but so it's actually a headline that I personally saw just recently, but it was something that came out in the news in the summer of 2018. But apparently, if you drink 6 cups of coffee a day, you will live longer. And that sounds fantastic, because I am a heavy coffee drinker in my daily life.
I don't know the research on this, but I'd heavily suspect that most of the science community is entirely fueled by coffee.
I have never drank coffee.
Oh my goodness.
Shock and
I
See,
know.
that's so interesting, because I'm not a big fan of coffee. I tend not to drink it unless I just need the purely for the caffeine. I don't enjoy it. I just suffer through it. But to have never drank coffee.
Never finished a cup of coffee. I've had a sip.
Okay.
And I've had various
And you found it tastes like
iced
dirt.
coffee things.
Do you like tea?
I like tea, but I've only just got into tea. My theory is that I have a very, very, very low tolerance to caffeine, because if I have like 2 sips of a cappuccino, I will fully shake, feel completely sick, get really bloated, and then need to go to sleep immediately.
But yes, so apparently drinking more coffee makes you live longer. So
Nice.
what's the story behind this? So it's a headline that came out in summer of 2018. But if we look past that dramatic headline, that drinking 6 cups of coffee. So like you don't drink any. So Katie, you don't drink any coffee.
Yeah. How did they get to 6 cups of coffee?
6
That's
cups.
very
That seems a lot to
specific.
me.
So you were saying that you drink coffee, but you only drink it if you need that extra bit of caffeine. So on average,
I don't think I've ever drank more than 2 cups of coffee in a day.
So 2 cups of coffee in a day. On my side of things, I'm getting better at now, but there was a point where I would drink 4 or 5 cups of coffee a day, and that most of that would be before 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
I reckon I would die.
Yeah, it was a bad point of my like stressful academic career, but there was a point where that was what was driving me forward.
I'm glad you feel comfortable enough to admit to us that you had a problem.
Is this Caffeine Anonymous? I thought this is where I came along to. But yes, essentially there's this headline that went around that said that 6 cups of coffee a day was what kept you alive for longer. But if we were to read past that headline that came up on the Daily Mail, that was on, the Mirror Online. So this headline, that 6 cups of coffee a day would make you live longer, on the Mirror Online. So if you read past that initial headline, what you found in reality was that there was research done that found that there was inverse relationship between coffee drinking and mortality. So essentially the idea was that you drink more coffee, your likelihood of death goes down. Inverse relationship. One goes up, one goes down. Yeah. So I was like, okay, well, that sounds good. So in terms of actual numbers, what they found was that if you drank 6 to 7 cups of coffee a day, your chances of dying went down 16%. Whereas if you drank maybe less than 1 cup of coffee a day, your chances of dying went down 6%. So either way, drinking coffee meant that death goes down. Mm-hmm. So that was the information that they got that. But how did they do the study? Like,
what are the parameters?
Who are they looking at?
Yes.
And how do they know how much coffee they're
exactly.
drinking?
I'm like, how do you study something like this?
Like, you can't keep track of every cup of coffee someone's drinking.
Exactly. So what they did was they tagged onto this. So this was a bunch of American researchers who used a big study that was done in the UK called the UK Biobank. Essentially, this was a study that was conducted between 2006 and 2010, where they followed 500,000 people across the UK.
500,000?
500,000. That's a decent amount. So that's just under 500,000 people across the UK. And they used a comprehensive questionnaire and asked several different questions, one of which the questions was including how much coffee they drank. So they could answer the number of cups of coffee a day, less than 1 cup of coffee, no cups of coffee, or I prefer not to answer. So they had these options in their questionnaire. You put down exactly how many cups of coffee.
Sorry.
So
I get you.
in your case, you would say, how many cups of coffee, Luke?
Less than one.
Less than one. You would say
Zero.
and I would probably put down 3 to 4. But this was a survey-based questionnaire on a huge population of 500,000 people, about 500,000 people across the UK. But one thing to note was this study wasn't done specifically to look at coffee consumption in the UK. It was a huge study that was looking at multiple different factors and how their lifestyle changes.
So it was just sort of a generation of big data. So then you can delve into that and then figure out some conclusions.
Exactly. So this UK Biobank was looking at a questionnaire that asked different questions about coffee consumption, alcohol consumption, also different factors that included environmental factors and how that influenced their behavior, their biology. And to back up that level of biology, they took biological samples and genetic samples. So there was a huge pool of information. So this research, led by American researchers, looked at specifically their coffee consumption. So looking at a specific part of their questionnaire, talking about how much coffee they had and how that relates to death. So what they did was they had this patient pool, this information pool from the year 2006 to 2010, followed it up in 10 years later, so in 2016, to see how many passed away and how that related with their coffee consumption. So at the year 2016, of the 500,000 people that originally was part of this biobank, 14,000 had passed away. And they tried to figure out, of those that passed away, of all sorts of different reasons, whether that's cardiovascular diseases, cancer, they tried to see how did coffee relate to their death.
Okay, so you've got this study that's going on for years. Obviously, some people are gonna die during the study. You're looking at, of those people that died during the study, how many of them were big coffee drinkers, medium coffee drinkers, none, and
So one thing to note is this UK Biobank study looked at those at the ages of 38 to 73. So that's a mean age of 57 years old. So this is the older generation. That's one thing that we always have to take with a pinch of salt in this particular study. So it's looking at that older age population. So this effect with coffee might not necessarily apply with the younger age. And I use that term coffee very specifically because one part of the study was that they didn't differentiate the difference between whether caffeine had an effect or decaf coffee. So they found this effect of improving life expectancy regardless of whether you had caffeine or not. So as part of the study, you included what type of coffee you had, whether that was instant, ground, or decaf, and all three had a negligible effect on whether you lived longer. So it doesn't matter whether you have instant coffee or decaf coffee. Both of them made you live longer.
Okay, so it's not about the caffeine.
So it's not caffeine. So what they found in this study was a non-caffeine associated link with living longer. However, we use this kind of terminology that coffee makes you live longer and everything. But one thing that you have to note in this study that it was massively observational. So when I say observational, it's this idea that they looked at a pile of data that they had in their hands that looked at almost 500,000 people in the UK, a very specific population of 500,000 in the UK, that we could collect their biological information, their genetic information, and how much coffee they had. And a portion of them passed away in 2016. And of that population, they could figure out how coffee had an effect. But this is purely an association, this idea that correlation between increased coffee intake with living longer. But correlation in no way necessarily means causation.
Yeah, absolutely. This could very much become our tagline.
Yeah. Hashtag.
Because when it comes to these things like correlation and causation, there's some things that make sense. So if I was to run on a treadmill for longer, there's a correlation between running on a treadmill and losing calories. There's a correlation that if it rains more in Manchester, the sales for umbrellas go up. That makes sense. There's also a correlation that if it's sunnier, more ice cream sales are going to go up. So these are correlation that makes sense in terms of causation.
You mentioned the sunshine and ice cream one, which is a classic one that I'm aware of, which is there's a very good correlation between ice cream sales and deaths by drowning.
Is there? So, So there's a correlation in that pattern.
Because there's a correlation, but that is not causal.
Yeah.
We hypothesize as scientists that the reason for that is sunny weather. So more people go to swim during sunny weather, and more people buy ice creams during sunny weather.
More exposure to seaside and therefore
but
drowning.
There's no reason to suspect that people should stop eating ice cream because
it
will cause them to drown.
So this links nicely with the idea of confounding factors, which is a thing that they didn't really have an opportunity to take into account in this study because of the way that it's built. There's other factors that they are unable to take into account, such as they have the information about how much the individual smoked, were exposed to the sun. They have elements of that information, but they can't directly relate that as what might be causing some of the deaths. All the information that they could pull out was how much coffee they drank and how many of them died. Yeah. That was the association that they could make. But there's so many other things in play that could have caused those deaths. Coffee's not going to make you die. So drinking there's nothing bad about drinking coffee. In terms of the actual biological or chemical reason behind this, they can in no way put down. But drinking coffee is not bad for us. I don't think it will make us live longer, but it's not necessarily bad for us.
Yeah, you could conclude that with a reasonable degree of significance. But I think one of the key things that sort of strikes me in this study is the age range is people in their 30s to people in their 70s. And it's really important to note that if you're in your 70s, your life expectancy is a lot lower than people in their 30s. As you age, you're more likely to die, unfortunately. So that's why when you're looking at causes or correlations towards passing away, you need to look at it as a effect on your life expectancy rather than the percentage likelihood to die, because you need to take that sort of factor into it and how it changes that. Because there's things like age that directly affect it and therefore can undermine the study.
Yeah, absolutely, exactly that.
And also, like we were saying about the ice cream sales and drowning, they've just got this data to show.
They've just got those two things. Mm-hmm. They didn't know that it was a sunny
correlation.
Day.
Yeah, there could definitely be reasons why people who are able to drink lots and lots of coffee might also be very healthy people.
Yes.
Which would skew the results. So I'm trying to think of a ridiculous example. But it's certainly true that people who can't drink a lot of coffee, if it affects you, like it does Katie and I, we might be less inclined to drink lots of coffee because we have a sensitive constitution.
Yes, yeah.
And if you're a person that has some pre-existing health problem or something, you might be less inclined to drink lots and lots of coffee.
Yeah. And this is another caveat that we have to take into account of this study. So this study done by Dr. Erica Loffield, who's a cancer epidemiologist, using this UK Biobank-based data, is looking at 500,000 people across the UK who are healthy volunteers. So we need to always take into account in this particular study that we're looking at a small piece of the pie in the UK population, which are generally speaking healthy volunteers. So the effect of coffee or caffeine, but on everyone as a whole, might be different depending on your background, depending on your...
Yeah, because lots of people have
pre-existing conditions, or they might be...
In fact, if you're saying the age range is, 30 to 70?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very rare to find a 70-year-old who doesn't
have
something going on.
So that's the thing. In this particular headline about drinking 6 cups of coffee a day may help you live longer, that is a stretched truth from what the actual rest of the article said, which looks into details about the fact that Erica Loffield did this study using this UK Biobank data to pull out this association between coffee drinking and mortality. The idea that drink more coffee, less likely to die. That's a generic idea behind it. And it's the thing that they highlighted in the article at the end of the article, as it always is, but at the end of the article they highlight it. And in the actual research piece, it's the fact that there's this... We don't need to be so scared about drinking coffee. It is it's one of those things that we probably mentioned when it comes to coffee, whether it's chocolate, whether it's wine. In moderation, we're A-okay.
I feel like that may be the takeaway message from this then.
Yeah, everything in moderation. Especially red wine.
Yeah, I don't think I can handle 1,000 bottles in this space.
Oh, you wimp.
So, until next time, we've been Have You Heard, and you have been listening.
I've been Jason, and it turns out drinking 6 cups of coffee a day might not necessarily make you live longer.
I've been Katie, and have you heard that red wine might not be all it's cracked up to be?
And I've been Luke, and chocolate may not make you live longer, but I think you should enjoy it all the same.
Hear, hear.
Have You Heard have a number of projects exploring science in the news. For more information, visit haveyouhearduk.com.
If you have any questions or comments about the show, or a headline you'd like us to tackle, get in touch with us on Twitter or Facebook at HaveYouHeardUK, or email haveyouhearduk@gmail.com.
I've been Katie, and have you heard that red wine might not be all that it's cracked up to be?
I'm really sorry. Did you say crapped up
I
rather
think
than
I did.
crapped? We probably want to re-record that.